primarily what we're going to focus on is a spot that we are going to visit that hits some people pretty hard. Because you guys might have family members that were actually involved in this. And what I'm talking about is the Vietnam War Memorial. That is a memorial that is fairly recent, built in 1982. So it's not one of the oldest ones basically on the National Mall. It's not the newest one. World War II is actually newer and MLK is actually newer. But it is one that we still have basically thousands of Americans, millions possibly, go every single year that know somebody on that wall, that might have actually served with somebody on that wall. So when you guys get there, it could be a pretty somber place because there might be somebody who came in with the Rolling Thunder, a motorcycle group, that actually served with somebody there, and they're actively honoring that person. I wanted to give you guys a chance to make some connections possibly with people on that wall. And that's what we're going to be focused on today. There are over 58,000 names on that wall. So when you look at it, it hits you pretty hard, because if you've never seen what 58,000 names look like across the wall, it can really be impactful. And when you get there, and then you realize all 58,000 plus soldiers on this wall died, it's even more impactful. So today we're going to do a couple things. There is a link on Google Classroom that I'm going to take you to in a sec. But before we do that, and if you can just get to Classroom, that'd be great. Before we do that, I do want to give you guys a brief overview of what the Vietnam War was, because there's a lot of people that don't necessarily know what Vietnam War even was in the first place. It was a very controversial war. There's a pretty good chance that you guys might have grandparents that actually served in it, possibly. Does anybody know or have anybody in their family that served in the Vietnam War? So quite a few of you guys. So let me show you a little background about the war itself. It's going to be real brief. There is obviously a lot more to the war, but it gives you the basics. And then I'll take your question. Well, that worked well, huh? Attempt, dose.
Dear Tim and Obi, the Vietnam War confuses me. Oh, Jimmy. Nah, that's a tough one. Let's start with the basics. Vietnam is a country in Southeast Asia. In the 1800s, France took over control of Vietnam for its valuable exports, rice and rubber. Its neighbors, Laos and Cambodia, were also colonized by the French. Together, the three formed a single colony called French Indochina. The people of Vietnam didn't exactly appreciate being colonized. A lot of farmers lost their land and grew poor, while the French colonists grew rich. During World War II, a Vietnamese man named Ho Chi Minh started organizing his Viet Minh armies against their French rulers. Then, in 1946, war broke out between the Viet Minh and the French. America's president, Harry S. Truman, decided to help France. Well, it's complicated. At the time, the U.S. was involved in the Cold War with communist countries like the Soviet Union and China. Ho Chi Minh was a communist, and that worried Truman. See, American lawmakers believed that if Vietnam became communist, the rest of Asia would too. It was called the domino theory. At first, the U.S. gave the French money to help them win the war, but it didn't matter. The Viet Minh won victories in the north of the country. In 1954, France and the Viet Minh signed a treaty dividing the country into communist North Vietnam and anti-communist South Vietnam. The government in the South wasn't very popular with its people. So the North Vietnamese used the transportation system called the Ho Chi Minh Trail to send soldiers and supplies to the communist uprising in the South. But the U.S. supported the South's anti-communist government with money and advisors. Then, on August 2nd, 1964, North Vietnamese boats fired torpedoes on an American ship patrolling in the Gulf of Tonkin. President Lyndon Johnson got Congress to pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. It said the U.S. could use military force in Vietnam. At first, the force was limited to bombings. But by the end of 1965, there were 184,000 U.S. troops in Vietnam, and over 500,000 by the end of 1968. At first, everyone thought it would be an easy fight for the Americans. Their army was much more advanced and included a great navy and air force. But the Viet Cong, the communist soldiers in the South, fought a guerrilla war. They used small bands of soldiers to stage ambushes and built huge tunnel complexes to hide in. Not only that, but a lot of battles were fought in the dense jungle. The U.S. Army was not equipped to fight this kind of war. Even in the cities of the South, where Americans were in control, the Viet Cong would stage suicide bombings and sneak attacks. Back at home, the war became very unpopular. People couldn't understand why Americans had to die for a tiny country halfway around the world. Television, newspapers, and magazines brought home images of innocent Vietnamese civilians killed by American bombs. Protesters marched against the war, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. But a lot of Americans believed in the cause of the war. They thought the protesters were putting U.S. soldiers in danger by weakening support for them. Eventually, President Johnson stopped sending more troops. He even refused to run for another term as president because of Vietnam. Richard Nixon became president in 1968, promising to end the war with honor. But he didn't manage to make the peace until 1973, after his re-election. By the time the war was over, at least 1.2 million North and South Vietnamese were dead, and 58,000 American soldiers died in the conflict. Once the American army pulled out, the North Vietnamese invaded the South and unified the country under communist rule. Today, Vietnam is still mostly communist in its government, although it has shifted to a market economy where businesses and consumers decide what they want to sell and buy. And the US and Vietnam are now friendly with each other. But the Vietnam War divided Americans sharply. After all these years, it can still be a touchy subject to bring up with people who lived through it. Ask your parents what they thought of the war, and read up on it to make up your own mind. Peace.
All right. So if you're on Classroom, which you should be at this time period, all right, on the very, very top, there is a new assignment that has been created for you, okay, that goes with Vietnam War Memorial. All right. On that site, there are two things. A link, number one, that will take you to something called the virtual wall. All right, and there's also a link to a slideshow that I've already created for you, a little presentation that I've already created for you, okay? It has created a copy for you, which is good. Before you do anything with this slideshow, the first thing I want us to do is actually go in and look at the actual wall site. And if you're at the home page, it should look a little bit more like this from the end. All right. So what we're going to do first and foremost is try to find a soldier that we can make some sort of connection with. There are obviously over 58,000 names on this site. Some of them have a lot of information. Some of them are very limited. All right, depending on which one you're doing. You can search in a number of ways. The first thing I would do, all right, and that I would start off with is I go by last name. All right, and I go in and I search by last name. You can go in here and click on your last name, a letter, and then you can actually search. You can start typing it in. I can tell you I've already searched Goggler. There is no Goggler on here, but there are a lot of them that actually have names. Like I know for a fact Dobbins. There's 3 of them. All right. So when you get in there, I do for last name first and see if there's somebody with the same last name. If you have a more uncommon last name, you may not find somebody on there, and that's okay if you don't. If you don't find anybody with the same last name, the second route I would go is this. You can also search, find a name by state and city. All right. I can tell you right now, there is no Norton in here. Okay, so if you click on basically Norton, well, I'll go to Ohio first. And then if I type in Norton, unfortunately, it does not come up. But I will tell you there is a Barberton. Alright, well, if I scroll down, there's a Barberton. Now, right now it's searching names, but if I go to find name by state and city and I go to Ohio, and then I scroll down, there are ton in Akron. And there is a whole Barberton link, which some of you guys are from. All right. If you want obviously a local one and you can't find one by last name, that could be another option you could go with. Okay. If you can't find anybody in either of those areas, you can just kind of randomly search and go around. The big key here that I want you to figure out and that I want you to find, for example, I'm going to go ahead and go with a find name. I'm gonna go by last name. I'm gonna see if there's a Kovic. Just because, like I said, I know there's not one of mine. There's no Kovic, but I do know for a fact there is a Trevisano. And I gotta figure out how to spell his name first. No, maybe, because I did see one before. Let me go in here and I know there is one, so. If I scroll on down, all the way, there's Trevisano. Alright, now the big key is when I click on a name, it's gonna bring me into their profile. Then I'll get to your question here in a second, okay? When you get into their name, you click on the name, it's gonna bring you to the profile. I would not be doing any research on a soldier that there's not much information on. It's just gonna make it more difficult for you. Number one, if they don't even have a photo, I definitely wouldn't pick that soldier to research, because using a photo is one of the things you gotta put into your slideshow. Alright? So when you guys click onto here, I would go in and see if there's, pictures, see if there's information on here. I can tell you right now, some of the soldiers have a lot more information. Some of them actually have people that wrote stuff on them. I'm gonna see if I can find one just kind of randomly here real quick. So there's one with an actual picture, which if you don't have a picture at minimum, move on to another soldier. If I scroll down, there's actually other pictures that family members have possibly put, or other people. You can see somebody actually wrote in a letter here that they added. There are a few extra. This is a great soldier right here that I found because there's tons of extra information. For example, this is written by somebody who knew a little bit about that soldier. Some of them are written by family members. Some of them are written by other soldiers that came back from Vietnam and wrote about their brothers that lost their lives once they were back. So I would search for one with a decent amount of information. I hit kind of the jackpot here in terms of information, because this one has a lot. If you click on a soldier and you find one with a decent amount of information, at least a picture, where it says see full profile, that's going to give you a lot of extra information. Alright? If you click see full profile, it's going to give you birthday, it's going to give you hometown, it's going to give you how the person actually died. For example, this one is a ground casualty. He died of his wounds. I can see that he was in the Army. I can see how old he was. I can see when he arrived, the start tour, when he arrived in Vietnam, and then how long he was there before he died. I can find a lot of information. All right? When you go back to the slideshow and look at it, I put in here already everything I want you to add. All right? All you have to do with the slideshow, where it says name a soldier here, highlight that whole part, and then type in your soldier name. All right? Where it says, please include the following here, birth date, death date. I can just highlight birth date, death date. All right? Put in the birth date, death date, and it will replace the information that I put. Okay? You can play with the presentation all you want. I don't care if you change font color as long as I can read it. Alright, don't change the background necessarily. I do like my background on there, but if you want a different, basically look to it, you want a different color, I'm okay with that. Fine by me. Up to you on how you want it to look. This last one on here is panel and line number. When you get to that point, panel and line number is going to be really important for us that are traveling to DC, because it's going to tell us where they're at on the wall, okay? The panel and the line number. And that's going to be useful for us tomorrow, and then especially next week moving forward, so that we can actually locate where the soldier that you found on this wall memorial is actually at, and where they're actually located on the wall. When you get down to the very, very bottom, when you get all those details on there, okay? And you'll have to do a little searching possibly. The last one is just your letter to the soldier. Alright? I'm a big obviously advocate of the military. I have family members that serve. Some of you guys did too. To me, I admire soldiers that give up so much time and possibly their lives. So to me, this is our chance to kind of get back. Alright? Even though obviously they're not going to receive the letter because they passed, if you could write to that soldier, what would you tell them? You know, I put on there, I want 3 to 4 sentences minimum. I don't think that's too much to ask for somebody who actually gave up their life for literally you. and for me. So 3 to 4 sentences is actually kind of short. If you have more that you want to write on there, that's fine. I just wouldn't go past, the 1 page limit. I wouldn't make it like if it starts kicking on to the next page, you're going a little bit too long. I put the dear on there, I put the sincerely, all right, and then you can obviously tell that soldier, if you can tell him anything, after looking up his life story, his cat, how he died, what would you tell that soldier if you have a chance to write to them? That's what I want in that spot, all right? Dominic, you had a quick question?
I found 3 people with the same last name as me. How would I know if they're related to me?
You'd probably have to do you'd have to look up the ancestry somehow. You could obviously ask family members and maybe see, because some of these people might actually be related to you somehow. That's why I would definitely go with the last name first, because there's a chance. And then I would go to the city or something else if you can. Yeah.
This person has the same middle and last name as me.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's kind of creepy.
It's DELBIN and then Lee Cole.
Wow. That would actually be pretty cool if you guys go home and you find out they're actually, that would be pretty neat. If you got grandparents that you can still get a hold of pretty easily, they're probably going to be the best ones to get a hold of, because obviously they can go a little bit further with it. And your grandparents most likely were alive during the Vietnam age. Your parents were either not alive yet, or depending on their age, incredibly young, but most likely they're not going to be around. You're going to be talking probably grandparents and more likely great-grandparents. Caitlin, you had a question?
There was 10 people
With the last name Hooper, I believe
There's a
it.
lot.
That's a common one. Yeah, yours is too. Alex, did you want to search online for a little bit?
I was going to say, what are the chances of Isaac being related to one person? Because one person came up for him and he's an Isaac.
I mean, fairly common. Yeah, I'll let you search the thing and see if you can find a name or anything. You don't have to do that. Let's see if you can find it. Yeah, so here's what I'm going to have you do, okay? I'm going to have you go ahead and jump on in, play around with it. Don't start your actual slideshow until you feel comfortable with a soldier. Like you found a soldier that you want to do. It sounds like a lot of you guys found a soldier that you definitely want to do on there. I would advise, and this is me giving you a really good suggestion, I think. I would advise after you're done researching through on the whole wall site, I'd go on and Google search them. And when you Google search them and you type it out, don't just type their name, because if you just type their name, you're going to get probably some random guy in Montana that's got a Facebook site. All right? What I would do, I don't know. I just kind of went further. First thing that popped in my head, first date. When you guys go in there, what I would actually do is I type in their name and then I put either their death date, because you have that on their profile, put their birth date, their death date, or just put Vietnam War, all right? And see if they're in. Sometimes nothing will come up because there's just not that much information on them. Sometimes you might get newspaper articles about that person, other family members. You might get a plethora of information there. So once you found it, you think you feel pretty comfortable with it, you can get started. Remember to you'll put that image in there. So you got to have an image most likely to be able to pick that person, and then try to get that information. Call me over if you get stuck. Where are they from?
Looks like he's a coach.
Colorado. Were you guys from Colorado? No. Non-hostile, died of other causes.